Somewhere over northern Israel, a drone crosses the horizon. It is small, cheap, built in hours, not months, and within moments, a beam of concentrated light will begin trying to end its flight. But this story isn't about the drone. It's about the machine watching it. Because the hardest part of this weapon was never making the beam. The hardest part is keeping the weapon from destroying itself while it destroys the target. Iron Beam is not just a weapon that fires light. It is a machine built around the problem of surviving its own power. For 50 years, air defense has meant the same basic transaction. Something comes at you, and you launch something back. An interceptor missile carries its own propulsion, its own guidance, its own warhead. It is a complete disposable machine, built once, fired once, gone. Iron Beam breaks that transaction entirely. It fires no projectile. It carries no explosive. There is no magazine to reload because there is nothing physical being launched at all, only energy converted into light and aimed. Rafael, the Israeli defense company that spent roughly 3 decades developing the system, built it around a single proposition: replace a manufactured object with a controlled beam of energy. The appeal is obvious. A missile has to be built, stored, transported, and eventually replaced. A laser engagement, once the system exists, costs mostly electricity. But that advantage comes with a price the missile never had to pay. A missile carries its own energy with it, self-contained until the moment it detonates. A laser weapon has to generate that energy on the spot, control it precisely, fire it in an instant, and then get rid of everything it didn't use. That last part is the story most people never hear. Because a laser powerful enough to disable a drone in a short engagement doesn't just produce a beam, it produces a problem. Where does the rest of that energy go? Start small. A microwave oven draws around a kilowatt. A city block might draw a few hundred. A field hospital generator might put out several hundred kilowatts on a good day. Public reporting has described the system as a 100 kilowatt class laser with an effective range commonly reported in the 7 to 10 kilometer range against rockets, mortars, drones, and short-range threats. Those figures shouldn't be read as exact specifications for every Iron Beam variant. Smaller and larger configurations have also been reported. To produce that much usable beam power, the system has to draw considerably more electrical power than that number alone suggests, because no energy conversion process is perfectly efficient. We don't know Iron Beam's exact internal power architecture. Rafael hasn't published it, and this documentary won't invent it. But the physics of any high-power laser system follows the same basic chain, regardless of the manufacturer. Electrical power enters the system. Power electronics condition and regulate that current. The laser converts a portion of that electrical energy into a tightly focused beam of light. Some of that energy reaches the target, some is scattered or absorbed by the atmosphere along the way, and much of the energy lost inside the weapon becomes heat in the laser source, the optics, the power electronics, and the cooling system itself. The beam is the visible part of the weapon. The power and cooling architecture is the part that determines whether the weapon can keep operating. Some high-power laser systems use stored energy systems, such as capacitor banks, to help deliver short bursts of power on demand, rather than drawing directly from the grid at the moment of firing. Whether Iron Beam specifically uses that architecture is not publicly confirmed. The universal engineering problem remains the same: deliver enough electrical power to the laser instantly without destabilizing the system. And that's before a single photon has hit anything.
This is the part of the story most explanations skip. It's also the part that actually decides whether the weapon works. No real laser system converts all of its input energy into useful light. Electrical to optical conversion is inherently lossy. Some energy escapes as heat inside the laser source itself. More is lost in the optics that shape and focus the beam. More still is lost in the power electronics and control systems running everything in the background. The laser does not simply fight the target, it fights the heat created by fighting the target. And that heat is not a side note, it's an operational threat to the weapon itself. If it isn't managed, beam quality can degrade. Optical components can drift subtly out of precise alignment. Delicate coated surfaces can be stressed by repeated thermal cycling. The system may be forced to throttle its own output to protect itself, and an engagement that should take seconds could stretch out or fail. To be clear, under normal operation, iron beam's optics are not melting mid-engagement. That would mean the cooling system had already failed. The entire thermal architecture exists specifically to prevent that outcome. Heat management isn't a footnote to the weapon's design. It is the weapon's design. Every joule sent toward the target creates a thermal problem behind it. So how do you get rid of heat fast enough to fire again? The beam leaves the weapon at the speed of light. The heat does not. It stays behind inside the machine. In systems of this class, the general toolkit is well understood, even if Iron Beam's specific implementation isn't public. Heat exchangers pull thermal energy away from the laser source in optics. Coolant loops carry that heat to radiators or heat sinks where it can be released. Some architectures use thermal storage, absorbing heat rapidly during firing, then dispensing it more slowly afterwards, buying the laser a longer burst before it has to pause. Forced air assists in venting waste heat from electronics and enclosures. A laser powerful enough to damage a drone is also a heating system pointed in the wrong direction. The cooling architecture must continuously pull that unwanted energy away from the laser generator and its optics. This is where the weapon's real limits show up. Cooling doesn't just protect the hardware, it sets the rhythm of the entire battle. How long can the beam stay locked on one target? How quickly can the system re-engage the next one? And when a barrage of drones or rockets arrives at once, does the system have the thermal headroom to keep firing? Or does it have to slow down and let the previous shot's heat clear first? The laser can engage repeatedly, but only as long as power, cooling, weather, line of sight, and maintenance all keep up. The system's endurance is not determined by the laser alone. It depends on how well its power electronics, cooling equipment, optics, and other components survive repeated engagements. The beam is only as durable as the weakest part of the machine behind it.
Even a perfectly engineered beam has to survive something no engineer built: the sky itself. The air between the laser and its target is never empty. Dust, smoke, humidity, rain, aerosols, and pockets of rising heat all sit in the beam's path, and every one of them can scatter, absorb, or distort part of the light before it ever reaches the target. The weapon is not aiming through empty air. It is aiming through a moving, changing optical obstacle. This is not a hypothetical weakness. Field reporting on Iron Beam's deployment in northern Israel has described its effective range shrinking, in some cases dramatically, during cloudy or rainy conditions, precisely because bad weather fills the atmosphere with the dust and moisture that scatter a laser beam. To fight this, high-energy laser systems generally rely on some form of beam control, sensing how the atmosphere is distorting the beam in real time, then adjusting focus and pointing to compensate. We won't claim to know how many times per second Iron Beam's optics correct themselves, or exactly how its adaptive systems are engineered. What we do know is the principle. The system has to measure the obstacle it's shooting through, not just the target it's shooting at. Illuminating something that's standing still is easy. Holding a beam on something small, fast, and evasive is an entirely different problem. To disable a target, Iron Beam has to detect it, classify it, predict its flight path, lock a beam onto it, and then, critically, keep the energy concentrated on one vulnerable point long enough to cause real damage, while the target keeps moving and the atmosphere keeps shifting underneath the beam. One account of the system's engagement process describes it firing hundreds of small, coin-sized beams rather than a single large one, concentrating them onto a vulnerable spot once a hit is confirmed through reflected light. A targeting philosophy less like a single blowtorch and more like an adaptive swarm of light converging. The required dwell time depends on the target and the conditions of the engagement. Public estimates for how long the beam must remain locked on a target before it burns through vary. Figures in the range of a few seconds up to roughly 6 to 8 seconds have been reported, depending on the target type and conditions. This documentary won't pretend that number is fixed. What matters is the principle. The beam doesn't destroy on contact. It destroys through sustained, precisely aimed exposure, which means tracking accuracy is not a supporting feature, it is the mechanism. This is also why Iron Beam has, so far, been described as effective against relatively slow-moving threats, drones, mortars, short-range rockets. High-speed ballistic missiles are far more difficult because their speed, trajectory, altitude, and short engagement window make it much harder to maintain the required dwell time. Here is where the economics change everything. A single interceptor missile is a manufactured object: body, propulsion, guidance electronics, a warhead, storage, transport, and eventually replacement. Multiple industry estimates place the cost of a single Tamiya interceptor, the missile used by Iron Dome, at tens of thousands of dollars. And a laser engagement, once the system itself exists, primarily consumes electricity. Public estimates often place the marginal electricity cost in the low single digits, commonly around $2 to $5, although the exact figure depends on the engagement and what expenses are counted. That figure needs a careful qualifier. It is not the cost of the weapon system. Iron Beam itself, the laser source, the power electronics, the cooling infrastructure, the tracking and fire control software represents decades of expensive research and a substantial unit cost. What's cheap isn't the weapon, it's the next shot. The revolution is not that the laser is free. The revolution is that the next engagement does not require manufacturing another missile. Against a threat landscape increasingly built around cheap, mass-produced drones, machines that cost a fraction of the interceptors sent to stop them, that shift in the cost equation matters enormously. It's the difference between a defense that can be exhausted by sheer numbers and one that, in principle, can keep firing as long as it has power and can manage its own unit.
It would be easy, at this point, to call Iron Beam an unstoppable shield. It isn't, and the honest version of this story has to say so. The system needs a clear line of sight to its target. It cannot fire through terrain, and its effective range can shrink sharply in rain, cloud, dust, or heavy smoke. It requires a steady, substantial power supply, and its rate of re-engagement is bound by how fast its cooling architecture can reset. Public reporting indicates that only a limited number of operational systems have been fielded so far. That means some threats will still be handled by Israel's conventional systems even when Iron Beam is available. Nor is Iron Beam currently positioned as a defense against high-speed ballistic missiles. Reporting has consistently drawn a line between the slower, low-altitude threats, rockets, mortars, and drones that the system is built to handle, and the far harder problem of intercepting a ballistic missile in its terminal phase, a role still left to systems like Arrow and David Sling. That's why Iron Beam isn't deployed as a replacement for Israel's existing air defense layers. It's integrated into Israel's broader layered air defense network, alongside Iron Dome, David Sling, and Arrow, an additional layer rather than a wholesale substitute for the missile-based systems already in service. Iron Beam is powerful because it changes the economics of certain engagements, not because it removes every limitation of physics. So return to the question this documentary opened with. How do you generate enough concentrated energy to disable an incoming threat without that same energy destroying the weapon that produced it?
The answer was never just build a stronger laser. It was building an entire system around a single, unglamorous engineering constraint. That every unit of electrical energy sent into the system leaves behind some waste heat, a thermal problem that has to be removed before the next shot. Power generation, energy conversion, thermal management, atmospheric compensation, precision tracking, fire control software holding it all together, engagement after engagement. Iron beam is often described as a laser that shoots down threats. That is only the visible part. The real achievement is the invisible machine behind it, the power system, the cooling loops, the optics, and the control software that keep the weapon alive enough to burn something else out of the sky. Israel did not build a weapon that ignores physics. It built a weapon that makes physics do the defending.
Subscribe to Grand Structures.